Let's talk about Canada and let's talk about their fitness. And it's a little bit of a sobering tone to take from that joke, but how are we feeling about the Canadians' fitness here, Ollie? Is it a little bit concerned, mildly concerned, or we should probably be fairly concerned about this?
I'm definitely mildly concerned when I hear that Jesse Fleming is sitting out of a training session a few days before the opening game. According to what Bev Priestman has said, it sounds like she's going to play, and that's not in doubt. But I don't think I'd be surprised if it was a typical kind of scheduled rest day again in the week building up to the opening match, that one of your key players isn't training normally with the group. So that one rings a little bit of an alarm bell, and I think they need to start well, Canada, in this tournament for a couple of reasons. Like, there's not much breathing room here. One is that I think Nigeria is going to be a tough opponent. They're going to have to play well to win this game. And you can make an argument that the best player on the pitch is going to be Nigerian. So this is a team that poses a threat and won't be a pushover. And we've seen that in the past, that Canada are going to need to play well to win this game. And secondly, I think there's not much room for error in this group. Like, when you look at the importance, obviously, of finishing in first place compared to second, what that could mean for the knockout stage. Like, a draw in this game for Canada is a bad result as far as I'm concerned. You kind of immediately hand the initiative to Australia if they take care of their game against Ireland. So it's not one of those tournaments where you're facing someone in the first game, or you have a group that on paper is easy enough where you can kind of ease yourself into it, like the US probably can against Vietnam. Canada's going to need to be at their best or near their best straight from the off here. And if there are still questions about fitness and players getting back to full fitness, that's a little bit of a worry, I'd say.
Thing is, Ollie, it's no excuse. Which team in this tournament doesn't have issues when it comes to injuries or players needing to step up or players that might not be 100% ready to go? So I know it'll be an issue for this team, especially in attack, but they need to find a way. Their strength has always been, playing their defensive makeup and shape. And in those areas, they seem, rather good. I know Jade Rose isn't playing at this tournament, but you have established, experienced players in those defensive areas. And that's going to have to be their MO. They're going to have to be pragmatic once again in this tournament to find a way. So yeah, Fleming, we're not sure like what the issue might be. Perhaps she just needs a couple days, which is fine. And clearly a key player to this piece. But again, there's simply no excuses. You can't use that as a reason.
But are you concerned?
No, because then every team across this competition will have to be concerned to a certain degree. And not everyone's coming into this tournament as Olympic champions as well. Like, so, you can't be like, this is why you bring 23 players. And I thought that Bev Priestman used the squad perfectly in the Olympic Games, just the way that she rotated, the times that she made the changes, the ability to use the depth of the squad. So she's going to have to likewise manage the squad appropriately in this tournament as well.
I definitely think that the closer we get, and sorry, I'll give it to you in a moment here. The closer we get to the first game, and Garrett, to build off of your callback to the Olympics, because you're right on it, they're going to have to win 1-0 games, 2-1 games. Like this is not going to be an offensive clinic. And you think, well, if Fleming is down, and let's say there's a world where she doesn't play the first game, Nigeria is the trap game because they are fast and aggressive and they can score goals. So if you don't have full fitness out of Deanne Rose and Nichelle Prince, who are a lot of people think coming in to be the saviors, and they could be if this is a deep run, Canada needs points in the first few games. So the longer this goes and the more question marks we have, the more I think this might be like bunker down, take the under kind of a tournament, Ollie.
Yeah, and I think the big difference is that, like I said, Canada just doesn't have that first game where they can feel like maybe they can work their way into the tournament. Like, the US plays Vietnam, Spain plays Costa Rica, England plays Haiti. Like, Canada has a harder game than that. And that, I think, is where the injury and the fitness concerns, impacts them maybe a bit more than some of the rivals.
But Ollie, if you're the Olympic champion and you're playing Nigeria in this first game, and it's putting a scare into you, doesn't that kind of set your standard? No, but doesn't that set your standard for what you think this team can do or won't do at this tournament? Like, any side that's a true contender in this tournament, at least for me, where I'm sitting, and we saw Nigeria last year, Canada play them twice. Canada should be able to beat a team like this at a World Cup.
Of course.
They really should. Canada are going to be significant favorites heading into this game. So the fact that you're nervous, I'm not. I think Canada is going to be prepared enough to go into this game and should be able to handle them. But if that's where your perspective is, I'm curious to hear why. Is it can't be some overriding belief in this Nigerian team to be like some Cinderella story at this tournament. Perhaps it is for you. And maybe it speaks more to what you think about Canada in this tournament.
No, I expect Canada to beat Nigeria. There's no question about that. But I don't think they'll beat Nigeria, or they could certainly be at risk of dropping points against Nigeria if the performance is a 5 out of 10. If the US are a 5 out of 10 against Vietnam, they'll probably win 6-0. The same thing with Spain against Costa Rica. Like, there's a bigger gap there. This is a game where I think Canada needs to be a 7 or an 8 to win this game. And if they're not at it from the first whistle of the first game with fitness concerns, it could cause them a problem. That, I think, like I said,
it's a World Cup. You need to be a 7 or 8 or a 10 at the minimum.
You might not.
Right?
That's what I'm saying in some of these other games.
Then that's a problem.
Yes. It could be a problem. It could be their trap game right out the gates. Like, and they spoke about it yesterday on Goodnight Australia, New Zealand. It's true. You do not want Australia to be a game you have to win, because the pressure, the energy in the stadium back on the East Coast is going to be very, very special for the Aussies.
Unless Australia are on 6 points out of the gate and they're through, and then that third game isn't necessarily a bad thing, playing Australia third, depending on what happens in those first two.
But but in all likelihood, there's going to be one team in that game that only needs a draw to win the group and one that needs a win. And you would rather be on the right side of that equation, I think.
Of course. And Canada should, based upon playing the two weaker opponents in this group first. Same thing with Australia. It should Australia. Be. But that's in a game like that, if it is a draw, then scoring goals in these opening games, it's paramount to me. Put yourself in a position to go on and win the group. So
that's why they need to be good from the off it. That's what I'm saying.
But what I'm saying, it's less about if, it's about how many. Like, that's what needs to show over these first two games. I'm not concerned about them coming away with the result in these games, but it's about making sure you put yourself in a position to control your own destiny.
Let's talk about our southern neighbors, the Americans, coming in as the title holders once again, looking for a third straight and fifth World Cup overall. Gareth, should the Americans be viewed as favorites, maybe even overwhelming favorites, or is it a bit closer than you might think?
Well, they are, according to the books. They are the odds on to go on and win this tournament, and rightfully so. They've won the last two tournaments. They've been in the finals of the last three Women's World Cups as well. And I know that they've lost players. Players aren't playing, like Sauerbrunn and others who have been critical to the success of this team going forward. But they just seem to replace some of these experienced players with younger players who may even be better. Smith, Rodman, go down the list. I mean, this team is loaded. I think if there is a question mark in this team, it's maybe center back. Gerba coming in, playing center back and replacing a Sauerbrunn. But Adam, how much of a concern is this actually, when over the course of their last 16 competitive games, they've only conceded a goal in one of those games? 15 clean sheets in their last 16 games. This is a juggernaut. I believe it's like 5 regular players out of this team. They're still exceptionally strong, and they're rightfully the odds on to go on and win this tournament.
Yeah, I think the questions or some critiques about the ruthlessness under Vlatko Andonovski are fair, but you're right. They haven't stumbled. They haven't really faltered. I remember being in the press box for their game in New Zealand, their final tune-up, and it was like 10 minutes before the starting 11s had been printed, and Alex Morgan's like, yeah, I'm not going to play. I'm not quite feeling it today. I don't want to tweak anything for this friendly. And they won like 6-0. The player that replaced her was like, you could almost think that it was Morgan still on the field. So the depth can't be questioned in this team. And the path, I think it's a very manageable path for the U.S. And let's be real. They showed up to training yesterday and the Kangaroos were on the field ready to welcome them there. So that seemed like a good omen for them. Ollie, what do you think?
Yeah, I kind of think this could go either way with the U.S. I think talent-wise, like they could be the best U.S. team ever. Like there's so much talent, particularly in their front line. When you look at some of the players coming through, Smith is pretty established now, but still a young player. Rodman, Thompson, there's all over the team. There's these young players coming through that I think have massive potential. But there's got to be, I think, a few more question marks than there has been in the past about the US. Becky Sauerbrunn out at the back. Sam Mewis out in midfields,
Mallory
Rose Lavelle and
Swanson.
Julia Mallory Swanson is a huge one up front, obviously. Rose Lavelle and Julia, that's 2/3 of their best midfield for me coming into the tournament off the back of injuries. Still some questions about their fitness. And I do just think they have been a bit more uneven under Vlatko Andonovski since that 2019 World Cup. And yes, their record coming into this tournament has been very good, but I question kind of the strength of schedule over the past year or so. I think they've beaten up on some weaker teams, to be honest with you, that's produced the kind of run and some of the stats that you can cite coming into this tournament. So they absolutely on paper have the potential to be the best team in the world and to win this World Cup. But I think you can maybe poke a little bit more at a few different vulnerabilities that might be there that haven't necessarily been in the past with the US. It's a team that's still in a bit of transition, so we'll see. But they should be favorites for sure.
You gotta look hard though. Like they have greater depth than any other nation in this tournament. Their players get paid more than any other team in this. They're taken care of to a level that no one else is in this tournament from top to bottom. So they have every single advantage given to them heading into this tournament. So hey, look, it's possible they falter. If you look down the road, perhaps they play a couple decent teams of Sweden in the semifinal. I'm trying to figure out what their path is because I do think it's relatively straightforward for the US, but I would be shocked if they're not playing in that final. And in the final, anything can happen, right? So we'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of the conversation too about not just seeing the Americans and like everyone shaking in fear about them now, it has more to do with the rest of the world closing the gap to them than anything the Americans have necessarily done to stumble as well. Injuries will be probably the most talked about point to this World Cup. And you can't escape it because there are some superstars missing. But it seems that the Lionesses have been particularly afflicted in terms of captains being unavailable, superstars, Beth Mead, Frank Kirby, Leah Williamson, all not in and available for Australia, New Zealand. So let me go to Ollie for this one first. How much will these injuries impact the chances of the European champs?
Well, they're going to have a massive impact. There's no question about that, because obviously England would have loved to have taken the European Championship winning starting lineup pretty much intact with one or two changes and roll it back. Exactly. And I think they would have had a very good chance of winning this World Cup if they'd been able to do that. So now I just think it's a totally different England team. It's more a team where you're back where you were before the Euros, where you're trying to put together the pieces and find a balance and find something that kind of hits it off, right? And there's no shortage of talent when you look at Russo and Kelly and Toon and Hemp and like Rachel Daly, who was playing left back in the Euros final, went and was the top scorer in the WSL this year. She's now a striker. So there's plenty of players who can fill those gaps potentially, but that's what it is, right? It's potential. And they've got to figure out what are the right combinations. How do they get the best out of the players they have? So look, Sarina Wiegman is certainly a coach that you would back to do that if you had to pick anyone in the women's game to do so. She's a world-class coach, but it is more of kind of a bit of a mystery box, I think, this England team, than obviously would have been the case if it was just a Euros lineup coming back.
Maybe. Well, I mean, when you lose Williamson, Mead, Kirby, it's gonna leave a mark. But Lauren James is back in this team as well.
Yeah.
Toon wasn't starting at that tournament. Alessia Russo, who's now a star, she wasn't starting. She was coming off the bench in that tournament as well. If there's an area where there's more question marks, is just in terms of the depth, because they could turn to the depth in the Euros. Players like Russo, who really stood up and really made a difference for this team. It's going to be a very, very strong starting 11. But are the depth players good enough? And will those players be that are going to be turned to make a difference in this tournament? I think that's where the question marks reside. But I mean, they have a phenomenal coach, great team again. And they're right up there with the United States. Again, every team has dealt with these injury issues. I don't think there's a side in this tournament that's going in with a clean slate. So This is just part of it. But this England side, the expectation now with winning the Euros is that this team is going to compete for a World Cup. How do they handle it? Are they willing to step up, on the World Cup stage? These are some of the little questions that need to be answered, but I think they're going to be okay.
We're going to spend a little bit more time at the end of the show about favorites and odds on certain awards, but I just want to ask sort of generally, you guys, who is your dark horse to win this tournament? Let's start with Gareth.
I have two.
I can outline a dark horse if you want, but I expect you to give me some not outlineable answers.
Yeah.
I only honestly think that there's probably 6 or 7 teams that have a chance at winning this tournament.
Really?
Among that group, yeah, I can't go any deeper than that. Australia, home nation, have come up with some big results. They beat um, they beat a bunch of big dogs in the recent months in the build up to this tournament. It seems like they're finding their form at a really good time. Playing at home, World Cup teams over the course of men's and women's history have done very well in this tournament. They're able to ride that emotion a little bit. And I think as an outsider, I think that there's some value in making a long shot bet on Australia. And the other side is Sweden, the Olympic finalists, a team that methodically went through the tournament. They have some very talented players, good fullbacks. I know there's some fitness issues in that team as well, but they're a side that I think is more than capable of challenging this tournament. I think have a decent path on their way through this tournament potentially as well. If they do play United States in the semifinal, if that's how it plays out, are they good enough to finally get over that hump? I'm not quite sure, but it's worth a bet there. So I like Sweden and Australia. Do you classify them as dark horses in this tournament, Adam? No. I personally do.
I would allow both of those. I would allow both
You're
of
too
those.
Soft.
Hannah Glass is their.
I don't think it goes any further than
Sweden.
that, though. Those are my 6 and 7.
I mean, the books have Sweden outside the top 6.
Exactly.
And for me, like that's.
I went by the books. Our friends at Tony Bet, by the way.
That's right.
These, and by definition, they are dark horses when it comes to the betting lines.
Ollie.
I think the meaning of dark horse has been lost.
You want a team that
100
times played should not win 99 times. You want the Cinderella story. You take
I don't even look at it.
Degree.
I don't even look at it necessarily as a dark horse is going to win the World Cup. I think a dark horse is a team that makes an unexpected run, right? Which is a little bit different here. So
okay.
I would go deeper than Wales in terms of potential winners. Like I think there's 6 teams that have a realistic chance of winning the trophy, but there's 5 more that could, I wouldn't totally rule out. So I'd go down to 11, which is generally generally the sports books have Canada as that 11th team, right? So I'm kind of upwards of them as a team that has some chance of winning it, not necessarily a big one. The interesting one is the one that comes after that, because I think below Canada, aside from this one team, it's difficult to see any of those other teams really making a sustained run, but Norway are interesting to me.
Yeah,
you just don't know what you're going to get from that team. Like they get absolutely smashed by England at the Euros last time, but then you look at their front three of Caroline Graham Hansen, Ada Hegerberg, and Guro Reiten. Like that is as good as any in the tournament. For a lot of people, Reiten was the best player in the WSL this season, even though Sam Kerr won Player of the Year. So they're a team that intrigues me, and particularly because they're in that group with New Zealand, which is the easiest group in the tournament as well. So they should have a good pathway to the knockout stage. So in my own definition of dark horse, I'll go with Norway.
Hey, Adam, who's your dark horse? Wow, great question. Thank you so much for asking. My goodness.
I want to know. Adam, tell us.
We're all ears, Adam.
My dark horse for this tournament is Japan. I think Japan, a previous champion of this tournament, is probably the team year in, year out that is forgotten about somehow. They have a really good blend
2 of the last 3 finals
and depth. They see, and that's why I think it's a kind of a comical dark horse, because they shouldn't be considered this low in the odds and in people's consciousness. Now, let's not kid ourselves. Group C is not a very easy group that they have themselves in. That's Zambia, Costa Rica, Japan, and Spain. So you would theoretically not be expecting to contend to win the group unless they can get a draw out of Spain. But this is a nation that have been doing the right things. They have their fully fledged domestic league. They're through 2 seasons now. Tanaka, their star, she's their oldest player, and she's only 29 years old. So you kind of have this youthful exuberance while also the expectations and the inherent pressure from Japanese supporters that they should make a run. So for me, the value is on Japan.
Again, I would question, are they truly a dark horse? Maybe not by my definition, but I do like Japan a lot. So I'm on board with that pick.
You'll allow it?
I'll allow it.
Thank you for your judgment, Oliver Platt.
The dark horse police over there.
Yeah. I just think people kind of don't really know what a dark horse is anymore.
I think people overestimate favorites so much that they get themselves in their own head that only 3 teams can win a tournament. So anyone outside that 3 is a dark horse. That's my take.